The morning shift at Golden Hills Rehabilitation Center started like any other for Amelia Carter. She checked her neat white uniform in the mirror of the staff bathroom, making sure her brown hair was properly secured in its usual bun. At 32, she'd never been one for makeup or fancy hairstyles. Work was her life and she liked it that way. "Amelia, he's here." Jenny, another nurse, burst through the door. "Damien Sinclair just arrived. Can you believe it? The billionaire everyone's been talking about." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew about Damien Sinclair's accident. It had been all over the news. The 40-year-old business tycoon had lost the use of his legs in a helicopter crash 3 months ago. Now he was here at their facility for rehabilitation. "They want you to be his primary nurse," Jenny added. "Dr. Morrison specifically requested you." Amelia felt her stomach tighten. She'd earned a reputation for being the best at handling difficult patients, but Damien Sinclair was different. His reputation preceded him, ruthless in business, impossible to please, and now, according to the gossip magazines, more bitter than ever. When Amelia entered his private suite, more like a luxury hotel room than a hospital room, she found him staring out the window. His wheelchair was positioned to face the gardens, but his expression suggested he wasn't seeing any of the beauty outside. "Mr. Sinclair, I'm Amelia Carter. I'll be your primary nurse during your stay with us." He turned his wheelchair slowly, and Amelia felt the full force of his steel grey eyes. Even sitting down, he commanded attention. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, and his suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. "Let me be clear, Miss Carter. I'm here because my board of directors insisted. I don't need anyone's help, and I certainly don't need a babysitter." "I'm not here to babysit you, Mr. Sinclair. I'm here to help you regain your independence." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe. Most people backed down when he snapped at them. "Your first physical therapy session starts in an hour," she continued. "Would you like to review the schedule for the week?" He studied her for a long moment. "You're different from the other nurses they've sent. They all either simper or shake. In their shoes. I'm just here to do my job, Mr. Sinclair, nothing more, nothing less." That first day set the tone for their interactions. Amelia maintained her professional demeanor despite his mood swings and sharp comments. She learned to read the signs of when his pain was bad, even though he never complained. She noticed how his hands gripped the wheelchair arms tighter on those days, how the lines around his mouth deepened. What she didn't notice was Dr. Morrison watching their interactions with unusual interest. She didn't see him making notes in a private file or catch the calculating looks he exchanged with certain members of the research staff. The weeks passed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Damien started asking for Amelia, specifically when he needed help. He learned her schedule and timed his therapy sessions to match. Sometimes late at night, when the pain kept him awake, they would talk. "Why did you become a nurse?" he asked her one evening as she adjusted his pillows. "I always wanted to help people," she answered honestly. "My mother was sick when I was young. The nurses who cared for her showed me what a difference one person can make." He was quiet for a moment. "You never talk about dating or going out. Don't you have a life outside this place?" Amelia smiled slightly. "Work is my life. I've never really had time for dating. Besides, I believe in waiting for the right person." "Waiting?" His eyebrows rose. "You mean you're a virgin?" "Yes." She said it without embarrassment. "I know it's old-fashioned, but that's who I am." He looked at her differently after that conversation. The sharp edges of his personality seemed to soften, but only when they were alone. Around others, he maintained his harsh exterior, especially during his weekly visits from the board members of Sinclair Industries. What neither of them knew was that their quiet moments, their private conversations, were all being recorded. In a hidden laboratory beneath the rehabilitation center, Dr. Morrison and his team were watching, waiting, and planning something that would change both their lives forever. One night, as Amelia was finishing her shift, she felt dizzy and had to steady herself against the wall. "Just tired," she told herself. But it wasn't just tiredness. Something was happening, something neither she nor Damien could have predicted, something that would expose a terrible truth about Golden Hills and the people they thought they could trust. The dizziness got worse over the next few weeks. Amelia started throwing up in the mornings, but she kept working anyway. She didn't want to let her patients down, especially not Damien. He was finally making progress, both in his physical therapy and in letting down his walls. At least, with her. "You look pale," Damien said one morning during his therapy session. "Are you sick?" "I'm fine," Amelia insisted, but right then, another wave of nausea hit her. She rushed to the bathroom, leaving Damien calling after her. When she came back, his face was tight with concern. "You need to see a doctor." "I have an appointment tomorrow," she admitted. She'd finally made one after a week of morning sickness. The next day at the doctor's office, Amelia's world turned upside down. "Congratulations," Dr. Peters said, looking at her test results. "You're pregnant." Amelia felt like she couldn't breathe. "That's impossible. I'm a virgin." Dr. Peters looked confused. She ran the tests again, same result. "Not only are you pregnant, Miss Carter, you're carrying triplets." Amelia left the doctor's office in a daze. How could this be happening? She hadn't been with anyone, ever. She wasn't even dating. It was like some kind of crazy dream. The news spread through Golden Hills like wildfire. People whispered behind her back. Some nurses who used to be friendly stopped talking to her. They thought she was lying about being a virgin, making up stories for attention. "The virgin nurse is pregnant with triplets," she heard them snickering in the break room. "What is this, some kind of miracle?" Only Jenny stood by her side. "I believe you, Amelia. There has to be an explanation." But what explanation could there be? Amelia kept working, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. She noticed something strange, though. Dr. Morrison seemed very interested in her pregnancy. He kept asking questions, offering to do special tests, wanting to monitor her closely. "We should do an amniocentesis," he insisted, "just to make sure everything is normal." Something about his eagerness made Amelia uncomfortable. She decided to go to her own doctor instead. Damien noticed the changes in how people treated her. He heard the whispers too. One day he wheeled himself into her office and closed the door. "Tell me what's going on," he demanded. "I've heard the rumors, but I want to hear it from you." Amelia broke down and told him everything. About the mysterious pregnancy, about being a virgin, about the triplets. To her surprise, he didn't laugh or look disgusted. He looked shocked, then thoughtful. "3 months ago, before my accident, I had some tests done," he said slowly. "The doctors told me I was sterile. It was genetic. I could never have children." They sat in silence, letting that sink in. "Something strange is going on here," Damien said finally, "and I'm going to find out what it is." That night, after her shift, Amelia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Damien had said. As she lay in bed, her hand on her slowly growing belly, she heard a noise outside her apartment. When she looked out the window, she saw a black car parked across the street. Someone was watching her. The next day at work, she noticed more strange things. Dr. Morrison was having secret meetings in his office. New equipment was being delivered to the basement level, a part of the building she'd never been allowed to enter. "I did some digging," Damien told her when they were alone. "Golden Hills isn't just a rehabilitation center. They're doing some kind of secret research here, and I think we're part of it." "But what kind of research could involve making a virgin pregnant with triplets?" Amelia whispered. "I don't know," Damien answered, his face grim. "But I'm going to find out. Whatever they're doing, they messed with the wrong people." As if things weren't complicated enough, Amelia realized she was developing feelings for Damien. It wasn't just that he believed her when no one else did. It was the way he looked at her when no one else was around, the way his voice softened when they talked. But how could she think about romance at a time like this? One evening, as she was helping him with his exercises, their hands touched. They both froze. The air seemed to crackle with electricity. "Amelia," he said softly. But before he could continue, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Dr. Morrison walked in, and the moment was broken. That night, Amelia dreamed about babies, 3 tiny babies with Damien's gray eyes. She woke up, crying, scared and confused. What was happening to her? What had they done to her, and why? The answers would come soon enough, but they would be more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. Jenny came running into Amelia's office early. One morning, her face white as a sheet. "Oh, you need to see this," she said, holding up a file. "I was cleaning Dr. Morrison's office last night, and I found these papers behind his desk." Amelia's hands shook as she read the documents. They were medical files, hers and Damien's, but there was more. Pages of notes about something called Project Legacy. Words jumped out at her: genetic manipulation, artificial implantation, controlled environment. "They've been experimenting on us," Amelia whispered. "But why?" She had to tell Damien. When she got to his room, he was already awake, looking at his laptop. "I hired private investigators," he said before she could speak. "They found something. Golden Hills isn't just doing rehabilitation. They're funded by a secret group of billionaires. These people are obsessed with creating perfect human beings." "But what does that have to do with us?" Damien's face was grim. "Think about it. A virgin nurse known for her compassion and dedication, a successful businessman with superior genetics. They're trying to create some kind of superior children." Amelia felt sick. "They stole from us. Your DNA, my body. They used us like we were their personal science experiment. And they chose you because you were perfect," Damien said softly. "Kind, intelligent, beautiful." Their eyes met, and Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Despite everything, despite the horrible truth they were uncovering, she couldn't deny her feelings anymore. "Damien, Before she could finish, Dr. Morrison walked in. His friendly smile looked different now. Sinister, calculating. How are my two favorite patients today?" he asked, but his eyes were sharp, watching their every move. "Just fine, doctor," Damien answered smoothly. "Amelia was just checking my progress." After Dr. Morrison left, Damien grabbed Amelia's hand. "We need to be careful, they're watching us, but I have a plan." That night, Amelia couldn't sleep again. She kept thinking about the babies growing inside her. They might have been created in a lab, but they were still hers, and Damien's. The thought made her heart race. The next day, strange men in suits started appearing at Golden Hills. They looked like security, but Amelia noticed they were watching her specifically. "They're afraid we'll expose them," Damien told her during their evening therapy session. "My investigators found out more. These people have done this before at other facilities. But it never worked. The pregnancies always failed." "What makes me different?" Amelia asked, touching her growing belly. "Maybe because you're special," Damien said, his voice gentle. "Maybe because we're meant to be." Their moment was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Jenny burst in, out of breath. "They know I took the files," she gasped. "They're coming for me." Before they could react, security guards appeared at the door. They grabbed Jenny, ignoring her screams. "She's just confused," Dr. Morrison said smoothly, appearing behind the guards. "We'll take good care of her." Amelia tried to follow, but Damien held her back. "We can't help her if they take us too," he whispered. That night, Amelia snuck down to the basement level using an access card she'd copied from one of the cleaning staff. What she found made her blood run cold. The basement was a huge laboratory. Glass containers lined the walls, filled with strange liquids. Computer screens showed genetic sequences, and there in a locked room she saw Jenny strapped to a bed. Unconscious, Amelia took pictures with her phone, her hands shaking. This was the proof they needed, but as she turned to leave, she heard footsteps. "You shouldn't be down here, Miss Carter." Dr. Morrison stood blocking her exit. Behind him were 2 security guards. "I'm afraid we'll have to adjust your care plan," he said, his smile cold. "For the safety of the babies, of course." Amelia backed away, her hand protectively over her stomach. She looked frantically for another way out, but she was trapped. "Don't worry," Dr. Morrison said, stepping closer. "We've invested too much in this project to let anything happen to you or the children. Mr. Sinclair's superior genetics combined with your nurturing nature, you're carrying our greatest success." The guards moved forward, and Amelia knew she had only seconds to act. She grabbed a metal tray from a nearby table and threw it at the lights. In the confusion and darkness, she ran. Her heart pounding, she made it to the elevator. As the doors closed, she heard Dr. Morrison shouting orders. She had to get to Damien. They had to escape. But how could they when he was still in a wheelchair? What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Damien was making a discovery of his own, one that would change everything they thought they knew about his condition. Amelia burst into Damien's room, out of breath and shaking. But what she saw stopped her in her tracks. Damien was standing beside his wheelchair, holding onto the windowsill. "You can walk?" she gasped. "Not exactly," he said grimly, "but I'm getting feeling back in my legs. It started a few days ago. I didn't tell anyone because something felt wrong. Now I know why." He showed her a paper on his bed. It was a medical report he'd gotten from his private doctor before coming to Golden Hills. According to the report, his spine had been completely severed in the helicopter crash. "There should have been no chance of recovery. They've been injecting me with something," he said. "I found these empty vials hidden in the nursing cart." He held up several small glass bottles with strange markings. "They're not just experimenting with babies. They're testing some kind of new treatment on me, too." Amelia told him what she'd found in the basement and about Jenny. "We have to get out of here, but how?" "My brother Marcus is coming to visit tomorrow," Damien said. "He has a private plane. If we can make it to the airport..." They spent the night planning their escape. Damien could stand and take a few steps. Now, though, he still needed the wheelchair for longer distances. They decided to leave during the shift change when there would be more confusion and movement in the halls. But the next morning, everything went wrong. Marcus never showed up. Instead, Dr. Morrison came to Damien's room with terrible news. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sinclair. Your brother's plane crashed on the way here. No survivors." Damien's face went white. "No, that's impossible." "The police say it looks like engine failure," Dr. Morrison said, his voice full of fake sympathy. The message was clear. This was a warning. That night, Amelia snuck into Damien's room again. He was sitting by the window, his face hard with anger and grief. "They killed my brother," he said quietly, "just to keep us here." Amelia put her hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Damien." He turned to her, his eyes filled with tears he wouldn't let fall. "I can't lose anyone else, Amelia. I can't lose you or the babies." She knelt beside him, and without thinking, they came together in a desperate kiss. All the fear, all the tension of the past months poured out. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "I love you," Amelia whispered. "I know. It's crazy. I know this whole situation is insane, but I love you." "I love you too," he said, holding her close. "And I'm going to get us out of here, I promise." But their tender moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Jenny. She looked terrible, her face pale and her eyes wild. "They let me go," she said, her voice shaking. "But they did something to me. I can't remember much, but I heard them talking. They're planning something big, something about the babies." Before they could ask more questions, Jenny started convulsing. Amelia tried to help her, but it was too late. Jenny collapsed, foam coming from her mouth. "Call a doctor," Amelia screamed. But when the medical team arrived, Jenny was already dead. "Natural causes," Dr. Morrison declared smoothly when he arrived. Poor thing had a heart condition, but they all knew the truth. Jenny had been murdered because she knew too much. Later that night, Amelia found a note in her pocket. Jenny must have slipped it to her before she died. It had an address and 3 words. "Trust Sarah Martinez." "Who's Sarah Martinez?" Damien asked when Amelia showed him the note. "I don't know," Amelia said, "but she might be our only hope." What they didn't know was that Sarah Martinez had once been a patient at Golden Hills too, and she'd been pregnant with twins. But after her babies were born, they disappeared, and she was told they had died. Now, 5 years later, she was working as a journalist, investigating a string of mysterious births and deaths connected to private medical facilities across the country. And she had evidence that could blow the whole thing wide open. But time was running out. Amelia was now 5 months pregnant, and according to the files she'd found, something big was planned for when she reached 6 months. Something that made her blood run cold just thinking about it. Sarah Martinez worked at the Daily Truth, a small newspaper on the outskirts of town. When Amelia and Damien arrived at her office, they found a wall covered with photos and documents, all connected by red string. "I've been waiting for someone from Golden Hills to find me," Sarah said. She was a thin woman in her 40s with tired eyes and graying hair. "They killed my babies 5 years ago, or at least that's what they told me." She pulled out a file from her desk. "But look at this." The file contained photos of 2 children, a boy and a girl, about 5 years old. They were at some kind of private school, surrounded by guards. "These are my twins," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "They didn't die. Golden Hills sold them to some rich couple who couldn't have children. They're being raised in a special facility. Like they're some kind of experiment." Amelia felt sick. She put her hands on her growing belly, feeling the babies move inside her. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Golden Hills isn't the only place doing this. There are facilities all over the country. They're creating what they call perfect children, taking DNA from successful people and implanting them in carefully chosen surrogates." "But why?" Damien asked. "What's the point?" "Money, power. These babies are sold for millions to wealthy people who want designer children. But that's not the worst part." Sarah's hands shook as she pulled out another file. "They're not just creating babies, they're trying to create a new kind of human being, stronger, smarter, maybe even with special abilities. The injections they've been giving me," Damien said. "The ones making me walk again." Sarah nodded. "It's all connected. They're testing different treatments, trying to push the limits of human potential. But it's dangerous. Most of the experiments fail. The mothers die or the babies are born with terrible problems. We need to expose them," Amelia said. "We have proof now." "It's not that simple," Sarah warned. "These people are powerful. They've killed to keep their secrets. And now that you're carrying triplets who seem to be developing perfectly, they're their most valuable asset." Just then, Sarah's computer beeped. An email popped up with a video attachment. It showed Jenny in the basement lab strapped to the bed. "Please," Jenny begged in the video, "don't hurt the babies, they're special. The DNA markers show they're different from the others. They're what you've been trying to create." Dr. Morrison's voice came from off-camera. "And what makes them different?" "The psychic connection," Jenny sobbed. "The babies, they can communicate with each other, and maybe with others too. They're what you wanted, the next step in human evolution." The video ended. They all sat in shocked silence. "That's why they killed her," Amelia whispered. She remembered all the strange dreams she'd been having, the feelings that weren't her own. "The babies, I can feel them. Not just moving, but thinking, feeling." Damien took her hand. "We need to get you somewhere safe now." But before they could move, the door burst open. Men in black suits filled the room, guns drawn. Dr. Morrison walked in behind them, smiling his cold smile. "Did you really think we wouldn't track you?" he asked. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm disappointed. We let you keep your little investigation going because it was harmless. But now you've gone too far." One of the men grabbed Sarah, another pointed his gun at Damien. "Please," Amelia begged, "don't hurt them." "Don't worry, my dear," Dr. Morrison said. "We just want what's best for the babies. Come back with us quietly, and no one needs to get hurt." But at that moment, something extraordinary happened. Amelia felt a surge of energy course through her body. The lights in the office began to flicker. Papers flew off desks. The armed men looked around in confusion. "The babies," Dr. Morrison whispered, his eyes wide with excitement and fear. "They're protecting their mother." The gun flew out of the first man's hand, then the second. Sarah broke free in the confusion and ran to her computer. "It's uploading," she shouted. "Everything, all the files, all the evidence. I've been streaming this whole thing live." Dr. Morrison's face contorted with rage. He pulled out his own gun and aimed it at Sarah. But before he could shoot, Damien tackled him. Despite his still weak legs, he managed to knock the doctor down. In the chaos that followed, more people burst into the room. But these weren't Dr. Morrison's men. They were FBI agents. FBI. Everyone down. What nobody knew was that Sarah had one more ally. Her sister worked for the FBI, and she'd been building a case against Golden Hills for months. The live stream had given them the final proof they needed. But as the agents arrested Dr. Morrison and his men, Amelia doubled over in pain. "The babies," she gasped. "Something's wrong. They're coming too early." The FBI agents called an ambulance, but Amelia knew they couldn't go to just any hospital. Dr. Morrison was laughing even as they handcuffed him. "You'll never save them now," he said. "The babies need special care. Only we know how to handle their unique biology." "He's right," Sarah said quickly. "My twins almost died when they were born. These babies are different from normal children." Damien took charge. "My helicopter is on the roof. I have a private medical facility 20 minutes from here." "You can't fly in your condition," one of the FBI agents protested. "Watch me," Damien growled. He'd been a pilot before his accident, and now with partial use of his legs restored, he wasn't going to let anything stop him from saving Amelia and their babies. They rushed to the roof. Amelia was crying in pain, but it wasn't just physical pain. She could feel the babies' fear, their confusion. Something was wrong with one of them. "Hold on, little ones," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "Your daddy's going to get us help." The helicopter ride was tense. Damien fought to keep the aircraft steady, while Sarah and an FBI agent named Lisa tried to help Amelia. Through the pain, Amelia noticed how naturally Damien handled the controls, as if he'd never stopped flying. "The experimental treatment," he explained, seeing her watching him. "It didn't just help my legs. All my reflexes are sharper, stronger." They landed at a sleek modern building on the outskirts of the city. A medical team was waiting for them, doctors Damien trusted, who had nothing to do with Golden Hills. "The babies are in distress," Dr. Thompson, the lead physician, announced after examining Amelia. "We need to do an emergency C-section." "No." Dr. Morrison's voice came from the doorway. Somehow, he'd escaped custody and followed them. He held a gun, and with him were 3 men in black suits. "Those babies belong to us. They're the property of the Institute." But suddenly, everything in the room started shaking. Medical instruments flew through the air. The lights flickered wildly. "It's happening again," Sarah gasped. "The babies—" Amelia felt a surge of power flow through her body. She could feel each baby's presence in her mind, 3 distinct personalities, already strong, already protective of her and each other. One was fierce and angry, one was calm and calculating, and one was fading. "Please," she cried out, not sure if she was speaking to the babies or to God. "Please, don't let them hurt us anymore." The gun flew out of Dr. Morrison's hand. The men with him were thrown against the wall by an invisible force. But the power was taking a toll on the babies. Monitors started beeping frantically. "We're losing the 3rd baby," Dr. Thompson shouted. "We need to operate now." Everything after that was a blur. Amelia remembered being rushed into surgery, Damien holding her hand until the last possible moment. She remembered Sarah praying in the corner and FBI agents wrestling with Dr. Morrison and his men. The last thing she heard before the anesthesia took hold was Dr. Morrison, shouting, "You don't understand. Those babies are the key to everything. They're the next step in human evolution." When Amelia woke up, the first thing she heard was crying, the strong, healthy wail of newborn babies. But something felt wrong. She could only sense 2 presences, in her mind where there had been 3. "Damien," she called weakly. He was there immediately, holding her hand. His eyes were red like he'd been crying. "They're beautiful," he said softly. 2 perfect little girls, but the 3rd baby," she whispered. "Our son." Damien nodded sadly. "The power they used to protect us, it was too much for him. He sacrificed himself to save his sisters, and us." Tears rolled down Amelia's cheeks. She could feel her daughter's sadness too. They knew they'd lost their brother. But there was something else. As she looked at Damien, she realized he was standing on his own. No wheelchair or support needed. "The treatment," he explained. "Whatever. They gave me, it worked. The doctors think it actually repaired my spine, but Amelia, that's not the only strange thing." He picked up a metal tray from beside her bed. As they watched, it slowly rose into the air, floating between them. "The babies didn't just share their powers with you," Sarah said from the doorway. "They changed both of you, and they're not done yet." Outside the window, a storm was gathering. Dark clouds rolled in, as if responding to the incredible events unfolding in the hospital room. Something new was beginning. Something that would change not just their family, but the whole world. The next few days were filled with miracles and mysteries. The twins, whom they named Hope and Faith, were unlike any babies the doctors had ever seen. Their eyes, already alert and aware, would sometimes glow with a soft blue light. Objects would move around their nursery on their own. And most remarkably, they seemed to know exactly what their parents needed before they even asked. "They're perfect," Damien whispered, watching them sleep in their special incubators. The loss of their son, whom they had named David, was still a raw wound in their hearts, but the girls seemed to radiate healing energy that helped ease their pain. Sarah spent hours documenting everything. "The world needs to know the truth," she said. "Not just about the evil that Golden Hills did, but about the wonderful things that came from it." The FBI had shut down Golden Hills and arrested most of the people involved. But Dr. Morrison had disappeared again, along with some of his key researchers. They'd found files in his office that revealed the full scope of their plans. "They've been doing this for decades," FBI agent Lisa explained, showing them the evidence. "Taking DNA from gifted people, trying to create superhuman children. Most of the experiments failed horribly, but a few succeeded. Like my twins," Sarah added. She was already working to get them back now that she had proof they were alive. But the biggest surprise came when other families started coming forward. Children across the country, all born through mysterious medical programs, all showing strange abilities. And somehow Hope and Faith could sense them all. "They're connected," Amelia realized one night when both girls woke up crying at the same time. They can feel when the other children are in danger. That same night they got the news. One of the children, a 3-year-old boy in Seattle, had been kidnapped. Security cameras showed men in black suits, just like the ones who worked for Dr. Morrison. "He's trying to rebuild his program," Damien said grimly. "We have to stop him." But how could they? They were still learning to control their own new abilities. Damien could move things with his mind now, just like the twins, but it was unpredictable. Amelia could sense emotions and sometimes even read thoughts, but it gave her terrible headaches. Then something amazing happened. As they stood in the nursery discussing what to do, Hope and Faith began to glow. A soft light filled the room, and suddenly, both Amelia and Damien could see visions, flashes of other children. Other families all connected by the same golden threads of energy. "They're showing us the way," Amelia gasped. "They want us to help the others." Sarah was already on her computer, mapping out the locations they were seeing. There are dozens of them, all special children, all in danger. But they weren't the only ones who could sense the connection. In his hidden laboratory, Dr. Morrison was monitoring energy signals across the country. His face twisted into a cruel smile as he watched the readings spike. "Finally," he said to his team, "the network is activating. Soon we'll be able to tap into their combined power." What he didn't know was that the babies were already one step ahead of him. Every time he tried to grab another child, Hope and Faith would warn their parents. Damien would fly his helicopter to the location, using his new abilities to help rescue the families. Amelia would use her empathic powers to calm the frightened children and help them understand their gifts. They turned Damien's private medical facility into a sanctuary. Sarah helped spread the word through secure channels, and soon families began arriving on their own. Parents with unusual children, all seeking safety and answers. One mother broke down crying when she arrived. "My daughter, she can heal people just by touching them. I thought we were the only ones. I thought we were alone." "You're not alone anymore," Amelia assured her, hugging her close. "None of us are." But their growing community also made them a bigger target. Dr. Morrison wasn't going to give up easily. He had too much invested, too many powerful people backing his research. Late one night, as Amelia was rocking the twins to sleep, she felt a dark presence approaching. Through her connection with the babies, she could sense evil intentions getting closer. "Damien," she called out, "they're coming." Before he could respond, all the lights in the building went out. In the darkness, they could hear helicopters approaching and the sounds of boots on the roof. "Get everyone to the basement," Damien ordered. "Sarah, activate the security protocols we set up." But as the families rushed to safety, Hope and Faith began to cry in unison. This time their tears glowed like starlight, and their shared vision was terrifying. They saw Dr. Morrison with a machine, a horrible device designed to drain and harvest their powers. "He doesn't just want to kidnap us," Amelia realized with horror. "He wants to take our abilities for himself. He wants to become like us." The twins grabbed each other's hands in their shared crib, their tiny fingers intertwined. As they touched, a dome of golden light began to form around the building. Outside, they could hear men shouting in confusion as their weapons stopped working. But would it be enough to stop what was coming? And could they protect all the special children scattered across the country? The answer would come sooner than they expected. and it would change everything they thought they knew about their powers and about the true purpose of Dr. Morrison's experiments. The golden shield around the building held strong, but Dr. Morrison wasn't giving up. His helicopters circled overhead like vultures, and his men surrounded the facility on all sides. "You can't protect them forever," his voice boomed through speakers. "Don't you want to know the truth? Don't you want to know why your babies are so special?" In the basement, Amelia held the twins close while Damien and Sarah worked to keep the other families calm. There were 23 children now, ranging from newborns to teenagers, all with extraordinary gifts. Some could move things with their minds like hope and faith. Others could heal or see the future, or even control the weather. "He's right about one thing," Sarah said quietly. "We need to know the truth. All of it." That's when one of the teenage girls, Emma, stepped forward. She was 16 with white blonde hair and eyes that changed color with her moods. "I can help with that," she said. "I can see the past. If we all join hands, maybe I can show everyone what really happened." The twins reached out their tiny hands, already glowing with that strange blue light. As the other children joined the circle, Emma closed her eyes and began to speak. What they saw shocked them all. Images flowed through their minds like a movie, but this was no fiction. This was history, buried and hidden for decades. They saw the first experiments started during the Cold War. Scientists discovering certain people had special genetic markers, genes that could be activated under the right conditions. They saw Dr. Morrison as a young man, brilliant but obsessed, convinced he could create a new kind of human being. But there was more. They saw other scientists who opposed him, who believed these gifts were natural, meant to emerge slowly over generations. They saw proof that all humans had the potential for these abilities. They just needed time to evolve naturally. "That's why most of his experiments failed," Sarah gasped. "He was trying to force something that needed to happen on its own. But Dr. Morrison had found a way to speed up the process. By combining DNA from people who already showed signs of ability, he could create children with active powers. The problem was, he couldn't control those powers. The children were too strong, too independent. He doesn't want to help humanity evolve," Damien realized. "He wants to control evolution itself." Suddenly the building shook. The golden shield flickered as something massive hit it. Some kind of energy weapon. Dr. Morrison had brought his own technology, powered by the energy he'd stolen from failed experiments. "Your sister," Emma said to Hope and Faith, her eyes glowing with visions. "She's alive." "What?" Amelia's heart stopped. "But David was never your son," Emma explained. "The third baby. She's alive, but they took her right after she was born. They made you think she died because she was the strongest of all. They're using her power to run their machines." The twins began to cry, but these weren't normal tears. As they fell, the drops of water turned to points of light that floated up into the air. Through their shared connection, everyone could feel what the babies were feeling. They wanted their sister back. Just then, Sarah's computer beeped. She'd been running facial recognition software, searching for Dr. Morrison's associates. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen. "One of his researchers, she's been spotted at a facility in Alaska. And look what satellite photos picked up. The images showed a strange building surrounded by ice and snow. But what caught their attention was the dome of purple light surrounding it, just like the golden shield the twins had created, but darker, twisted somehow. "That's where they're keeping her," Amelia said with certainty. She could feel it through her connection with the twins. "That's where they're keeping our daughter." "Her name is Grace," Emma said softly. "I can see her. She's so strong, but she's in pain. They're using her power to fuel their machines, to try to force evolution in other children. But it's killing her." Damien stood up, his decision made. "I'm going to get her." "We're going with you," said a voice. It was Mark, one of the other parents. His 12-year-old son could control electricity. "All of us. These monsters tried to use our children. It's time we stopped them once and for all." The other parents nodded in agreement. Their children had been victims, but now they were strong. Together, they were stronger than any weapon Dr. Morrison could create. But first, they had to get past the army surrounding their building. and somehow they had to get to Alaska without being shot down or captured. That's when Hope and Faith did something amazing. Their golden shield began to change, becoming transparent like glass. Through it, they could see Dr. Morrison's men preparing another attack, but now for the first time they could fight back. "The babies," Amelia whispered. "They're not just protecting us anymore, they're giving us a way to fight." Outside, Dr. Morrison watched in growing concern as the Golden Dome began to pulse with power. He didn't know it yet, but his greatest fear was about to come true. The very children he had tried to control were about to show him what real power looked like. The plan came together quickly. While Dr. Morrison's forces focused on the main building, the families split into two groups. Damien would lead one team to Alaska to rescue Grace, while Amelia stayed behind with the twins to protect the others. "I should go with you," Amelia said, tears in her eyes as she helped Damien prepare. "The twins need you," he replied softly. "And we need them too. Maintain the shield. Once we have Grace, we'll come right back." The rescue team included Mark and his son Tommy, who could control electricity, Emma, with her ability to see the past, and 3 other families whose children had defensive powers. Sarah would guide them using satellite data and her connections with friendly government agents. As they prepared to leave, Hope and Faith did something unexpected. Their golden shield separated into 2 layers, one staying with the building, the other forming a protective bubble around the rescue team. "They're learning," Emma said in amazement. "They're getting stronger every day." Dr. Morrison watched through high-powered binoculars as a section of the golden shield opened like a doorway. He saw the group running to Damien's helicopter, but he didn't try to stop them. His cruel smile suggested this was exactly what he wanted. "Sir," one of his men said, "should we follow them?" "No need," Morrison replied. "They're going exactly where I want them to go. Alert the Alaska facility. Tell them to prepare the machine. When they try to rescue the 3rd child, we'll capture them all." But Morrison had underestimated one thing. The connection between the triplets was growing stronger by the minute. As Damien's team flew north, Hope and Faith began showing Amelia visions of what was happening. She saw Grace, tiny and beautiful, floating in a chamber filled with purple light. Tubes and wires connected her to a massive machine, but instead of looking weak or afraid, Grace seemed to be waiting. Sometimes when the scientists weren't watching, she would open her eyes and smile, as if she knew help was coming. Back at the main facility, Morrison launched another attack. This time, he brought out his secret weapon. A child who had been broken by his experiments turned into a weapon. The boy couldn't have been more than 10, but his eyes were empty as he pointed his hands at the shield. Dark energy poured from him, making the golden light flicker. "Stop!" Amelia cried out. "You're hurting him." "Surrender now," Morrison demanded, "and I'll let him rest. Keep fighting, and his pain continues." The twins began to cry, feeling the boy's agony through their connection. But then something wonderful happened. Their tears, falling together, formed a stream of light that shot through the shield. When it touched the boy, his empty eyes filled with color again. Where am I?" he asked, looking around in confusion. "No," Morrison shouted. "What have you done?" The boy turned to him, remembering everything that had been done to him. With a scream of rage, he released all his power, not at the shield, but at Morrison and his men. Meanwhile, Damien's team had reached Alaska. The facility was heavily guarded, but they had surprise on their side. Tommy disabled their security systems with a wave of his hand, while Emma guided them through the building using her visions of the past to avoid patrols. They found Grace in a central chamber, just as Amelia had seen her. But when they tried to reach her, Morrison's voice came through the speakers. "I knew you'd come," he said. "Thank you for bringing me so many powerful children to fuel my work." The doors slammed shut. Purple gas began pouring into the room, the same drug they'd used to control the boy back at the main facility. But Grace chose that moment to open her eyes. The chamber holding her shattered. Alarms blared as she floated free, her tiny body glowing with intense white light. When she reached out her hands, every machine in the facility began to overload. She wasn't powering their machines, Emma realized. She was learning how they worked, learning how to destroy them. Through their connection, Hope and Faith felt their sister's power. They joined hands in their crib, adding their strength to hers. Amelia felt the surge of energy pass through her body as the triplets united their powers for the first time. All across the country, every facility connected to Morrison's experiments began to explode. Every piece of technology he had created to control and harness children's powers turned to dust. And in Alaska, Grace floated into her father's arms, smiling as if this had been her plan all along. But Morrison had one last card to play. As his life's work crumbled around him, he revealed the terrible truth about his own experiments on himself. His body began to change, growing larger, darker, as all the stolen power he had absorbed over the years took control. "If I can't control evolution," his voice boomed, now barely human, "I'll become evolution itself." The final battle was about to begin. But this time, the children he had tried to use as weapons were ready, and they were no longer afraid. Dr. Morrison's transformed body towered over them, a monster created by years of stolen power. Dark energy crackled around him like lightning, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural purple light. "I gave you all your gifts," he roared. "I made you special." "No," Grace said, her tiny voice somehow carrying over the chaos. "We were always special. You just couldn't wait for us to bloom on our own." Through their connection, Amelia could see everything happening. In Alaska, she held Hope and Faith close, their combined power flowing through the family bond. Other children in the facility joined hands, adding their strength to the connection. "Everyone together," Sarah called out. "Just like Emma showed us, we're all connected." Across the country, every child touched by Morrison's experiments felt the call. They joined hands in homes and hiding places, their powers linking into a network of light that spread like a web across the sky. Morrison struck first, sending a wave of dark energy that shattered windows and cracked walls. But Grace stood firm, a shield of pure white light protecting everyone behind her. Hope and Faith's golden power flowed through the network, strengthening every child's abilities. "It's time to heal," Grace said, and everyone understood what she meant. The stolen power. Inside, Morrison was corrupted, twisted by his evil intentions. But these children, the ones he had tried to control, had something he could never understand. They had love, trust, and the strength that comes from protecting others. Tommy stepped forward, channeling electricity through the power network. Emma added her visions, showing everyone the path to victory. One by one, each child contributed their unique gifts to the whole. Morrison's attacks grew desperate as he felt his stolen power being pulled away. The darkness around him began to fade as the children purified each strand of energy, returning it to its natural state. "No," he screamed, "I won't let you destroy my life's work." He reached for his final weapon, a device that could supposedly drain all power from anyone within range. But when he activated it, Grace smiled. The device exploded in his hands. All the machinery in the facility began to crumble, years of twisted science falling apart. Morrison's monstrous form started to shrink as the stolen power left him. "Grace knew," Emma said softly. "She's been sabotaging the machines from inside all along. Every time they used her power, she learned more about how to defeat them." Through their connection, Hope and Faith sent their love to their sister. The triplets' combined power created a dome of light that covered both facilities, protecting everyone inside while Morrison's empire crumbled. In the end, the man who had tried to control evolution stood revealed as just that, a man. His power gone, his facilities destroyed, Morrison fell to his knees. "Why?" he whispered. "I only wanted to make humanity stronger." "Humanity will grow stronger," Amelia said, her voice reaching him through the children's connection. "But not through fear and control. Through love, through family, through protecting each other." The FBI arrived to take Morrison away, along with all his remaining followers. Sarah's evidence ensured they would never hurt another child. Her own twins were finally returned to her, their powers now awakened and under their own control. In Knee, Alaska, Damien held Grace close as they prepared to return home. Her white light merged with her sister's golden glow, creating a rainbow bridge that carried them safely back to the main facility. The family reunion was everything they had dreamed of. Hope and faith reached for their sister with tiny, glowing hands. When the triplets finally came together, their combined power created a gentle wave of healing energy that spread across the country, helping all the children harmed by Morrison's experiments. 1 month later, the facility had been transformed. No longer a hideout, it became a school, a place where special children could learn to control their gifts, safely, surrounded by love and understanding. Sarah ran the school's outreach program, helping other families understand and nurture their children's abilities. Amelia and Damien watched their daughters grow, marveling at how their different powers complemented each other. Hope's gift for protection, Faith's ability to connect hearts, and Grace's power to heal machines and bodies. Together, they represented everything Morrison had tried to force, growing naturally through love and trust. The nursery was filled with floating toys and glowing lights as the triplets played. Sometimes other children would gather to watch them, learning that their own gifts were nothing to fear. "They're going to change the world," Emma said one day, her eyes glowing with visions of the future. "But not the way Morrison wanted. They'll show everyone that evolution isn't about becoming stronger than others. It's about learning to be strong together." Amelia looked at Damien, who could now walk and fly and move things with his mind. He smiled, pulling her close. "Our family may not be normal," he said, watching their daughters play. "But it's perfect, just the way it is." Above the school, a permanent rainbow shimmered in the sky, a sign of the triplets' protection, and a promise to all the special children of the world. No matter what gifts they developed, they would never have to face them alone. Love, after all, was the greatest power of all, and that was something no scientist could ever create in a laboratory. It had to grow on its own, just like the special children themselves, blooming in its own perfect time. The end.